Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/malicious compliance. In today's episode, won't get me a much needed PC upgrade to properly do my job? Okay, I'll make you watch me work. Project lead kept undermining me and wanted a non-engineer to pick up my work. My boss used me for MC 5 years ago, and I just figured it out. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Won't get me a much needed PC upgrade to properly do my job? Okay, I'll make you watch me work. I run the parts room at an independently owned auto body and collision repair shop. We'll call the owners Mr. and Mrs. Bossman. We do mostly insurance repairs and always have between 20 and 50 vehicles on property in various states of repair, depending on how busy we are. Once the estimate for a specific vehicle is approved, my job is primarily to order all the parts for the repair, track and receive and organize all the parts for all ongoing repairs as they arrive, input the invoicing and process any returns for wrong/damaged/unnecessary parts and such. Plus IT work, because apparently I'm the only person there who knows you can just Google a problem and somebody has usually already posted the answer on a message board from 6 years ago. I complain a lot, but in actuality I very much like my job, and I've become exceedingly good at it over the years. My coworkers are generally pretty great, there's almost no office drama, I don't usually deal with the general public, and the owners are mostly solid bosses, a husband and wife team. Mr. Bossman runs the day-to-day shop, and he is there on site pretty much every day, while Mrs. Bossman comes in periodically to do the books, which she watches like a hawk. Mr. Bossman is a decent guy so far as bosses go, but Mrs. Bossman is great. She's just one of those high-personality types who's all peaches and sunshine and rainbows 90% of the time, right up until the moment something doesn't go entirely her way. At which point she drops the smile and becomes the stubbornest immovable object you've ever butted heads against. May God help you if you actually anger her. She's not a Karen in the slightest, she's just an elemental force of nature, and you can bend like the reed or break like the twig. So I deal with Mr. Bossman on a daily basis, and only deal with Mrs. Bossman a few times a week when she needs something for accounting. My default work ethic used to be set to sack up potatoes, but that doesn't fly with the Bossmans and especially not Mrs. Bossman. I have learned the hard way to be very, very proactive in my duties, which is directly why I'm now a great parts guy. Didn't take long to find out that it's just far easier and safer to be able to redirect the coming storm with knowledge and paper trails than it is to face the fury head-on with laziness and ignorance. She always says the 3 most important rules to follow in this industry are 1. Cover your ass, 2. Cover your ass, and 3. Cover your ass, to which I'd add a 4th rule. Always send an email beginning with per our phone call. I just like to remind you. Always have an email, saved my *s so many times, becomes relevant later, and she freaking loves me, because I have become exceedingly excellent at making her job easier through diligent bookkeeping. As you also might imagine, doing all this ordering and invoicing and emailing and such demands heavy use of a computer, and for years I had to make do with one that was never built nor intended for the task. It wasn't even very old, just an underpowered tablet-style budget computer originally only meant for the shop foreman to occasionally check estimates. At any given time I had to run our estimating software plus 2 to 4 price-matching programs, and their accompanying background scanning programs, plus multiple Chrome windows for email and parts vendors and parts finder websites, plus image software to view repair photos or edit diagrams to email back and forth. The budget computer had 2 gigs of RAM and a dual-core 1.3 GHz processor. It could barely handle running Notepad if you had the main estimating software running, and it made my job painfully slow, even at the best of times. For 4 years I'd mention it to Mrs. Bossman, and it was always alright. I keep meaning to look into that, and then nothing, but that was better than bringing it up with Mr. Bossman. Mr. Bossman was a former repair technician before they opened their own shop together, so anything on the office end is already good enough until it breaks, and not worth wasting more money on in his eyes. All the upgrades should be on the production side of the shop since that's what he knows well. She's much more practical about office upgrades, thankfully. Anytime I'd mention how slow my computer was and how much it was slowing down my work, he'd just laugh it off and say it does the job, don't it, and walk away far too pleased with himself. Mrs. Bossman had been going back and forth with a specific vendor that was arguing against some outstanding credits and unpaid invoices that didn't match our numbers, which means they don't match my numbers, so she came into my office to ask me to look into them as normal. But today is not normal, it's especially busy, and I'm already a day behind where I should be. Cue malicious compliance. This time I decided that unlike normal, my workload was light enough, that I totally had the time right then and there and could look them up for her right on the spot instead of bringing her the files later that day. This seemed urgent after all. So I began searching our database for the problem invoices, and very deliberately and thoroughly went through every program I possibly could, opening every estimate and reconciliation and digital footprint to pull up any scrap of even slightly relevant information for her, so that she had all the relevant info to argue with the vendor, each new screen freezing and pausing and loading anew, each new refresh taking more of those long-form time-dilated seconds to complete, those seconds that drag on and on like waiting for a traffic light to turn. I was just being properly diligent, you must understand. Oh, here it is, I'd say in my most matter-of-fact, perfectly normal, everything is fine and standard and typical voice. Yeah, that part was returned back on. Oh, let me pull up the credit memo. Oh, actually that just shows when I generated the return, but not when the vendor actually took it back. Actually, I remember this one now. The driver didn't leave a return confirmation slip, so I think I sent the vendor a reminder email about that. Let me pull that up. Yes, I told them about the issue 2 months ago, and this is a follow-up email that was part of another chain. Let me forward you both of those, and actually I think I can still pull up the estimate here since it has the full reconciliation. I hope it didn't freeze completely. Just wait a sec, and it usually catches back up. She kept her smile up, but I could tell it had shifted and she was getting annoyed. Does it always take you this long to look up the invoices? I could tell she was getting really impatient, but she couldn't say anything about it since I was doing exactly what she just asked of me, and she does normally love that I'm this thorough, so long as she's not waiting in real time. Oh yeah, this is normally like this, I said casually. It's kind of frustrating sometimes, but Mr. Bossman doesn't want to buy another computer since this one does technically do everything I need it to do perfectly. Innocent moon eyes / it doesn't slow me down too much. Not usually. Blink, puppy dog face /star. I continued doing this for all 5 or so problem invoices, and honestly, it was a 100% typical thing to look up and really only took maybe 15 minutes total in the end. The only difference was making a big show of it while intentionally making it look like I wasn't making a show of it, but that was enough. Well, I really think we need to look into getting you a new computer. This can't be good for production turnarounds if it's always being this slow. Huge success. Storm of Fury successfully redirected from self to vendor, armed with timestamped acknowledgements for every rogue charge, and finally knowing the crap I have to sit through each and every time I double-click. With all the invoices and credits properly tracked on our end, vendors' accounting had to admit the f-up had been on their end, and we had been billed in error. I'm not always right, but even when I'm wrong, I can usually pull up a time-dated email to make it look like I wasn't wrong. Bend a little, and the hurricane may just pass you by for a less prepared target. She waited a few weeks to find a good deal, but sure enough I had a new computer shortly thereafter that is much more capable of running everything I need to run without derping out on me, and it's been an absolute champion. Decided to write this because it's been almost exactly 2 years working on the new machine that's still going strong, and just today I got an unrequested raise for good performance, so I'm feeling overly pleased with myself. Project lead kept undermining me and wanted a non-engineer to pick up my work. Some years back I worked on this project to build a mobile web app for collecting information from internal people. We had very limited tools and options for hosting, but I pulled some strings and got a slice on a server somewhere, and did all the dev myself. The project lead was weirdly arrogant and super insecure or something, which was odd because it was a volunteer project I was doing on the side because it would look good on a resume. He kept finding weird and needless ways to put down my work the entire, multi-month project. Near the end of the project things got even worse. He claimed either my name is brilliant, or maybe it's just easy, and I could pick up a programming book over the weekend and do it myself. He pretty much said it out of the blue. I had no clue why, and everyone else in the meeting just kind of sat in silence, not sure what to say. He also had this assistant/subordinate who was very non-technical, but a super nice guy, always tiptoeing around this dude's massive ego, and was clearly sympathetic to me for putting up with all this BS. Anyways, I finished the project on time, and when we were starting to wrap up, the project lead set up a meeting to hand off the work and future additions to the assistant, because of course everything I had done was so easy it should be a piece of cake when they need to restructure it all in 6 months. After he sent this email, the assistant privately messaged me and basically begged me to ham it up and make it sound impossible since he knew there was no way he could do this shit. So when we got to the meeting, I started going through a very long list of like 25 things they would need to know/do to pick it up, including using TTY software, command line work, server work, etc. About a quarter of the way through, the project lead stopped me and said, "Okay, I think we get it," and I said, "Just 1 minute, I'm almost done, then read off the other 75% of the list anyways." That pretty much shut him up, and his subordinate messaged me immediately thanking me for saving his ass. Whole thing was very satisfying. My boss used me for MC 5 years ago, and I just figured it out. About 5 years ago, I was the office guy for a small lumber mill. My direct supervisor was the general manager, but the owner was also pretty hands-on. The mill wasn't generating as much profit as the owner believed it could. He was probably right. The guy was smart as a whip with 60+ years of experience. One of the things the owner tried to do was hire an outside consultant to try and find ways we could safely increase productivity or cut expenses. The guy had owned and operated his own mill and also had a ludicrous amount of experience. One of the things the consultant had been pushing for was running the mill into overtime. He thought we could increase productivity without incurring more expense than we gained. My boss asked me to run an analysis of how much we would gain/lose if we ran overtime. I did the math and gave him the results. Even in the best case, every minute of overtime would result in a net loss to the company. This report had taken me several hours as I wanted to be sure I gave him the right answer. My boss took it, nodded, and the next day announced we would be running the mill in overtime. 2 weeks later, when I prepared the end-of-month financial statements, it showed a large loss. I was quietly seething, since I felt like I had been asked a pointless question, my time wasted, and my input ignored. But looking back on it with significantly more experience, I think I know what happened. I think my boss was bothered by the consultant who had come in to tell him how to do his job, and then given him bad advice. The owner wouldn't listen to my boss telling him he didn't need a consultant, so he did exactly what the consultant suggested, and let the owner judge for himself. As far as my report went, I think he just wanted to be sure it wouldn't cost us too much when he pulled the trigger. Tom, if you're reading this, I'm sorry I was resentful about the whole affair for the past 5 years, my bad. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.